January 3rd. See your Ford dealer now.
It is being called CalExit, a movement that appears to be gaining ground since the election of Donald Trump.
Supporters of the movement want California to become its own independent nation. KTVU's Monty Francis joins us with whether this has any chance, Monty, of becoming a reality.
Well, Ken and Julie, the group says it wants an international presence and recently opened what it's calling an embassy in Russia. But the idea of CalExit, as it's being called, faces some huge hurdles. In California, outrage over the election of Donald Trump is on regular display. Hillary Clinton received 4 million more votes in the state than Trump did. And given that much of the rest of the country is made up of red states, the idea of breaking away from the union doesn't seem as crazy to some as it once did.
The approach we're using is lawful, legal, and peaceful. And it's connected to doing a very small but significant tweak to the Californian Constitution.
Claire Hedin heads the Bay Area chapter of Yes California, a grassroots movement that's 3 years old. She says the level of support the group has received has tripled since the election.
There was such a strong divide between us all. You know, the people that actually wanted to vote Trump in and those of us that saw a very different future, you know, one to the negative by voting him in. So it just looks to me like it's not feasible.
California is the world's 6th largest economy and pays the federal government $370 billion a year in taxes. Yes, California says that's much more than the state's fair share. The group needs 500,000 signatures to qualify for the ballot in 2018. Hedin says she believes CalExit is a real possibility. But political analyst Brian Sobel isn't so confident. In fact, he puts the chances of California leaving the union at 0.
It would be anticipated that it would be challenged, of course, up to the Supreme Court. But at the end of the day, probably you would need a 2/3 ratification from other states in the union. California is a huge economic engine for the United States. And the idea that other states in the union would say, oh, yeah, you can leave and go off on your own is not only unlikely, it's incredibly improbable.
The founder of Yes California, Louis Marinelli, who is American but lives and works in Russia, recently announced the opening of an office in Russia, tweeting, "Today, the Embassy of the Independent Republic of California opens in Moscow." Hedin says there's a value in showcasing California's influence and economic power, even if the effort ultimately fails.
I think the fact that we're saying so out loud, and this is going to get louder, that we would rather be independent, I think it gives people pause for thought on both sides.
And the group plans to start gathering signatures next month. Now, there are two big questions here. Would a majority of Californians support the measure? And if it does pass, would 2/3 of Congress go along? Brian Sobel says the answer to that last question is no way.
All right, what about the founder's ties to Russia? Russia has shown it likes to mix it up in American politics.
So that is a question that's come up. He is an American. He lives in Russia. He's married to a Russian and has said that there's no connection between this movement and the Russian government.
And then the woman there with seemingly a British accent. I mean, where are the Californians in this story?
Well, I asked her if she considered herself an American or a Californian. She said, I consider myself a British